Hi, this is Linko, back with another video contest entry for Clip Studio Paint's Tips of the Month. This video is going to be on auto action, a cool feature in Clip Studio Paint that lets you basically record actions and play them back again. It doesn't record anytime you use a tool, like a brush, but instead, it's mainly used for speeding up your workflow, so you can automate certain repetitive window navigations and whatnot. So while making this video, I thought about what is the most tedious, time-consuming, but also useful task we could set to auto action in Clip Studio Paint. Well, here it is, making RGB channels out of your image. Look at the size of this guy. Don't worry, let's break it down. Okay, so we probably need to know where the auto action window is and how to navigate it before we get started. So let's go ahead, let's click on Window and ensure that auto action is checked. Now for me, it appeared here in the layer panel. You can keep it here if you want to, but I find that if I'm making a new auto action, I definitely want to see my layers panel at the same time. So I'm going to move it over here for demonstration purposes, but feel free to move it wherever you want. Now just a word of caution though, be careful moving it up into this window over here by the navigation. You have to be careful because now there's two trash can options, one for the auto action and one for the layer panel. If you mean to delete this layer here, but accidentally click on this trash can for auto action and ignore the message, like I always do, then there goes that auto action. And you can't undo deleting auto actions. I'm sad to say that this happened to me more than once. So, there's two modes you can have your auto action window in. There's regular mode and button mode. In the regular mode, we can view our auto action features, edit them, and play them. But we have to click and then press play. Button mode we can get to by right-clicking and selecting button mode. This is exactly as the name says, it just turns every auto action into a button, so we can click and we don't have to press play, it just performs the action. But there's no way to edit or create new auto actions in button mode. And you can't right-click either. So if you want to go back to the regular mode, just click this little icon up here and uncheck button mode. So auto actions are almost exactly like using a macro recorder if you used one before. If you perform an auto action and then press undo, it's not going to undo the entire auto action. It's only going to undo the last action in the sequence. Okay, so last thing to cover, in edit mode, you may be curious, what are these secondary checkboxes for? Well, these are for when you record an auto action that has a dialog box that pops up. So whichever one you check, it'll pause the auto action when it gets to that step, it'll let you tweak the settings, and then continue on with the rest of the actions after you confirm. Okay, let's get into it. So I'm going to first demonstrate RGB channel creation and show you why it's a powerful tool. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, then maybe you've seen the Channels tab before. Channels are great for getting very accurate selections, which can be useful for photo manipulation, photo bashing, and that's my guess as to why it's not in Clip Studio Paint, which is more about, manga, comics, and illustrations. Let's demonstrate. Here's a picture from a trip to Kyoto. Now let's say I wanted to select the sky. Well, that would be really hard to do manually. There's all these tree leaves in the way. I'm not going to get that accurate of a selection. So let's do it with channels instead. So I'll click on my RGB Channels auto action, and this will make 3 channels for us, just like in Photoshop. So as a basic explanation, these channels give information as to how much red, green, and blue there is in the image. For example, the red channel, the more white an area is, the more red there is in the image. The more white an area is in the green channel, the more green there is. And the more white an area is in the blue channel, the more blue there is in the original image. So if you want to make a selection of the sky, let's look at the blue channel. Let's change the levels by pressing Ctrl L and adjust it so that there's even more contrast between the sky and the rest of the picture. I want pure white against pure black. And now I can go in and do fine adjustments with a brush, set on overlay mode. Now if I paint white into the light areas, I'll get them closer to pure white, and painting black into the dark areas, I'll get them closer to pure black. And you can also just use the lasso tool and just Alt-Delete to fill with your selected color. Now that we have that, let's go into Edit and convert brightness to opacity. And now the white disappeared. So if we just right click our thumbnail, click selection from layer, and create selection, now we're done. We have a very accurate selection. If you want, you can go to select and convert this selection to a selection layer. Now we can access this a lot easier. But see what we can do with it. Going back to the original layer with the selection active, I can invert the selection so that I'm only selecting the sky and then just delete it. Now I can replace the sky with, whatever I want. Let's bring in this other picture from the Kyoto trip, scale it up, and perform some color adjustments to it. And there we go. We changed the entire sky in maybe 2 minutes without messing with the rest of the picture. So this isn't only useful for photo manipulation, but the ability to get that accurate selection has a lot of potential for concept art, matte painting, and just, in general, making art. Here's a recent illustration of the zodiac I did, and maybe if I didn't like the shape of these trees, I could bring in, this tree from this other photo, which is also from Kyoto. It's very beautiful. I recommend visiting sometime. Even for an image like this, which looks separated already, you'd think that using Magic Wand or Color Gamut Select would be able to get all the details, but it still falls a little bit short. So using channels is one of the surest ways to get an extremely accurate selection. And it doesn't have to be just trees and skies. I can bring in the lanterns here into this illustration I did of a Asian cityscape and adjust the colors and see if it fits, all while keeping that fine detail like the lettering in the lantern. Okay, so as a side note, this auto action will only create the RGB channels for the currently selected layer. If you're the type that likes to use a lot of layers and you want the RGB channels of your entire image, well, you can't just do it on one layer. You'll have to right click on a layer and then merge visible layers to a new layer before using the auto action. And if you want, you can edit this step into the auto action. So I hope I sold you on the benefits of selections using RGB channels. If you want, I've uploaded the auto action feature onto the Clip Studio Paint's asset store where you can download it for free. So check it out there. The next bit will just explain the process of recording it, and if you want to follow along and learn more about the creation of auto actions. Otherwise, at the end, I'll just give a quick bonus tip for some auto actions that I like to use, and we'll end it there. Hello. If you're watching this, then you're here live with me. We're going to go through manually creating these channels if you have problems with downloading it from the asset store, if you just don't want to and you want to learn about auto action. So we're going to make this big boy. Definitely something you don't want to do manually every time if you do RGB. If you like to use RGB separation as a selection tool. So it's not going to be that hard though. We're going to do red channel, green channel, blue channel, and then just combine them all into one giant auto action. Okay, so feel free to watch this at 1.5 times speed. That's what I always do for these types of YouTube tutorials. I won't get mad. I won't know. That's okay. So first step, just open up any image, preferably not a black or completely white image. It'll be hard to see what you're doing. This is an illustration I did. And open up your auto actions menu. So I'm going to do this in a new set. So create, I actually already made it. And sets are just a way to organize your auto actions into whatever category you want. So create a new auto action and red channel. Okay. I recorded this like 5 times already. So wish me luck that I don't make any mistakes this time. Okay, let's get started. So when you're ready, press the record button here and Clip Studio Paint will start recording all your actions. The first action we want to do for this red channel is actually renaming our selected layer. I'm just going to rename this to layer, but choose whatever you want. And this is just so that when you apply this auto action in the future, it will work no matter what your layer name is, because Clip Studio Paint keeps the layer name as a navigation way to know how you're navigating through the layers. So next step, we want to duplicate this layer and go into levels adjustment. So Control L is a shortcut. And if this is the red channel, we want to go into our greens and turn that to 0, the output. Go into our blues and turn the output to 0 there too. We should have a completely red and black layer. Now, next up, just duplicate this layer twice. And now go into, on the top level, go into Hue, Saturation, Luminosity, or Control U as a shortcut. In the dialog box for hue, type in 120, and do the same thing for the bottom layer, except type in, so Control U, and then type in -120. So now we have green, blue, and red. Now for the green and blues, we want to turn the blending mode into screen. So go into that layer, turn both of these to screen blending mode. And there we have it. That's our red channel. All you have to do now is just merge this down and rename the layer red channel. There we go. We're done. And remember to stop recording. Hit stop record. Here's our red channel. Not too bad. We're going to do the same thing for the green and blues. It's going to be very similar, so I'll go through those a little bit quicker. First thing before, so let's create our green channel. First thing before we get started is rename this to whatever. Rename our original layer to whatever, because our first action again is going to be renaming the layer. Use whatever you used for the last auto action. So I'm using the name layer here. Okay. So exact same steps. Duplicate. Control L for levels. It's just that for the green channel, obviously, you might have guessed, we turn the red and the blues to 0. And we start off with a green and black image. Other than that, it's the exact same thing. So duplicate, duplicate, Control U, 120, Control U, -120, and then screen, screen, and merge, and rename this to green channel. Okay, so if you're like me and you forget that your record button is still recording and you do a bunch of other stuff like mess around with the layers, change the visibility, go into window, I don't know, go have a snack, come back, make a whole painting, and this is on the whole time, then don't worry, because you can just press stop and you can go into the actual auto actions and delete everything you don't need. So the last thing I needed was, let's see, wow, I did way too much. Okay, this is the last step, right? Change layer name, to green channel. And so I'm just gonna select all the things I don't need and press delete. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing for the blue channel. You can, if you want, just record the same steps, except in the levels adjustment, only keep blue turned on. But you could probably tell that these are so similar. Why don't we just copy all these actions in there? And we can do that too. So I'll do that for the blue channel. Just duplicate one of the other ones and copy all of these actions and drag it to the blue channel. Now I'll delete the copy, nothing in there. So we have the blue channel. All we need to do is change level correction, because that's a difference. So what we can do is just go there and delete it. Now go to the action right before, which is the first duplicate layer, and hit record. All we need to do here is change the levels so that green is 0 and red is 0. There we go. And then remember to stop recording. And the only other difference for the blue channel would be the last step, change layer name. We don't want it to be called green channel, so delete this auto action step. Go to the last action, record, change this to blue channel. There we go. And stop record. Okay, and that should be it. So you can do it either way you want. Record all the actions again, or just edit an existing action. So let's see if this works. Let's see if this works. If I press play on the blue channel, there we go. It gives me a different looking channel than the green one, and which is different from the red one, which is good. Now we're all done. We just need to combine all these steps together. So make a new auto action, RGB channel separation. Okay, and you might have guessed it. All we're gonna do is duplicate all of these actions. So make a copy of each of the actions you just created, and we're just gonna drag it in there. So drag in the reds, and then delete that copy. Drag in the greens. Oh. And once you drag it in here, it's just going to get stacked on at the very end, right? So dragged in the greens and dragged in the copy of the blues. Drag in the copy of the blues. Okay. There we go. So it's pretty large auto action, but it's not going to work exactly right away. So let's take a look. So if I apply this to the layer, let's see what happens. Oh, there we go. Oh, and you can see, so something's wrong. The layer names are off, and all these channels, they look the same, right? Well, what we need to fix is we need to make one minor edit. So in between, if we open up the RGB channel separation we have now, go to where there's a double change layer name. And this marks where our red channel ends and we started creating the next channel, the green channel, right? What we need to do here is record another action. So hit record on the first change layer name. We need to record an action of changing editing layer to any layer that's called layer or whatever you named it originally, and then stop recording. So this is so that in between making each channel, it goes back to the original image to recreate that channel, right? So we're going to need that there, and we're going to need that in this next set. So in between, where is it? Change layer name. I don't see it. Green channel. Oh, here it is. In between these two change layer names, in between the green channel and the creation of the blue channel, we need to record another action. Record, and just change your editing layer to layer or whatever you named it. There we go, and stop recording. Okay, so let's try this again. We're gonna delete these and go back up, and let's try pressing play again. Moment of truth, fingers crossed. Did I press it? Oh, I did. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we have a red channel, a green channel, and blue channel. We are done. Congratulations. Oh, one last thing before I forget. So if you want to verify whether or not you made your channels correctly, so if these are actually making the correct RGB channels, we can do that by trying to get the original image back from these channels. So we want to recreate this image or whatever image you used from the channels we get from our auto action. So to do that, go to each channel and press Control I to invert it. Yeah, so invert all of them, Control I. If you reassign a shortcut, it's also found here, Edit, Tonal Transform, Reverse Gradient. Okay. So now for each one, go into Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity. Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity. Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity. All right. After that, make a selection by right-clicking on the thumbnail, not on the layer, the thumbnail, and going to Selection, Create Selection. Okay, so start with the red channel, make that selection, make a new layer, and fill that in with pure red. So double-click on the color icon here and type in 255 for red. That's pure red, and fill that in. And do the same thing for the green layer. So deselect, green layer, create a selection from the green channel, new layer, fill it in with pure green. So 255s in the green, 00 for everywhere else, red and blue. Fill that in and do the same thing. Oh, okay, and do the same thing for the blues. Create selection, right click thumbnail, create selection, new layer, fill that in with pure blue. There we go. All right, so with those layers created, all we need now is a pure black layer underneath. So create a new layer, and remember, this should be refer only to editing layer. Fill in a pure black layer. So just 0 everywhere, 0, 0. So pure black layer, and last step, just change these blending modes to screen. So give that a try, screen, and last one, ta-da! Okay, so oops, we should have our original image. Let me just group these. Our original image, we created it again from the layers. So let's double check. And there's no discernible difference. And if that works, then you made your RGB channel selection, RGB channel separation accurately. So congratulations, you did it. All right. So thanks for following along. Hopefully it wasn't too long and boring. Hopefully watched at 1.5 times speed. Even if you did, still probably like 10 minutes. Yikes. Sorry about that. Anyways, thanks, and see you later. Okay, so this wouldn't be a very comprehensive auto action video if I didn't briefly mention shading techniques. If you want to do shading and coloring in a very organized way, you can use auto action to set up some tone curves for you in a folder. I don't do this too much right now, but there's a lot of benefit. You can move on from step to step, add in shadows, then add in lights. You can even do this to each individual object in your scene. If you remember math class, this is like this way of making art. It reminds me of, showing all your work to get to the right answer. Okay, if you want to set this up, then you can either follow these steps here. I have them listed out, but I'll do it again. So if you press play, basically it's just a new folder with a hue, saturation, luminosity, and 2 tone curve layers. The tone, hue, saturation, luminosity one is just toned down to give it a tone, and this shadow layer is a tone curve, just pulled down a little bit, don't have to be that accurate, and light curve just pulled up. And just delete these 2 layer masks so that when you paint white into the light layer, you get some light, and painting white into the shadow layer gives you some shadow. And you can always go back to these tone curves and adjust them. Alright, back to this paint again, for the last time, I swear. This one is less common, but it's a technique I learned from Jama Jurabev. It's kind of to unify the image and soften up areas. So I purposefully sharpen this image too much, and let's see what it does. See, notice it's quite a subtle effect. Essentially, it's just duplicating the entire image, applying a Gaussian blur to it, and setting the blending mode to lighten. You can always make a layer mask if you only want the effect on a certain part of the image. So, here's the auto action setup. A merging of all visible layers, duplicating that layer, Gaussian blur to whatever value, I set it at 12. You can always check the box to get a prompt each time. and then setting that layer to lighten. I find this auto action useful because it merges all visible layers to a new one, and then it applies the effect on a separate layer. So I can quickly check how it's changed my image just by toggling the visibility. So it could be a good one for you to try out. Just slap it on there whenever you're not sure if your picture could use some blending. Alright, that wraps it up for all the tips I have for you here. You can find out more on the Clip Studio Paint's tips website. And again, if you want that RGB channel separation, auto action, wow, that's very long. You can find that in the description below on the Clip Studio Paint's asset store. Thanks. Bye.